because I have my Facebook people, they be on here too. I had to turn them on. Hey, Facebook people. But anyway, each of the historical stages in the Bible represent a shift. They represent a change in terms of God's dealings with humankind. You got to think of the Bible as a progressive revelation, meaning that God skillfully brings the people along so that when we get to Jesus, Jesus is the fulfillment. He is the piece that makes everything make sense, okay? It's like he is the finishing piece. And you really can't fully appreciate the finished piece when you haven't gone through, well, the process, the various things that God brought into being to prepare you so that you can really, really understand. And so when we're going through these stages, you got to realize that God is revealing with the thought to how to get us ready for his actual entrance, his actual, coming. I mean, in his mind from day one was that he was going to come. But before he came, he had to introduce himself in periods, in stages. I think that's in Hebrews where it says, off the top of my head, sometimes I don't quote it perfect, but it says, God who in sundry times appeared in various ways and through various forms, has in these last days revealed himself by his own Son. And so, Revelation, like I said, it's progressive. It's sort of like how when you're in school, you start with first grade, then you go to second grade, third grade. Well, each one prepares you for the next grade. And so think of these stages in that way, that there is a revelation or emphasis in each stage on a way that God, in terms of how he relates to us, that defines that particular period. It's almost like there's a theme about his nature that is pervasive during that time, or a theme in terms of what God is doing with and in the people of God at that time. I mean, you could call it a season. There's a season when circumstances the people of God are in allows for a unique opportunity for God to convey truth about himself and provide a certain kind of conditioning for how they can learn about him, with the thought toward helping them to know how to relate to him. And so, as a general rule, nothing is more impactful in shaping you, changing you for good, like experience. Experience. It's great to get good information. I'm not taking nothing away from learning data. And it's always helpful when you understand truth. But somehow, when you live through something, you find that there's certain kinds of situations that you cannot help but be transformed by just merely having to go through that. There's something about having to do something in reaction to something that, brings things to the front and causes a depth of realization, and also shapes who you are. I mean, we're all the product of what we have experienced. Everything just about us is the result of how we have been treated, how we have been conditioned, the kinds of ways in which we had to change. And those things shaped us. I mean, what you feel about yourself has a lot to do with how you treated. I mean, your ability to have relationships is probably dictated too by the kinds of relationships you've had. I guess that's why parenting is so powerful, because you tend to pick up your parents' ways. I mean, it's unconscious, but you tend to assume because that was your dad, that other dad's gonna be like that, and that you should be like that. And it's almost like you're not even aware of how certain people have influenced you, affected you, and it starts from youth. It starts from you when you're a little tot. You just pick up different things. Some good, some not so good. But somebody can sit down and say, you should be like this, you should do this, and you should do this. But it really is more impactful by what you see, what you feel, what you endure. And so when you think of it that way, you realize that everything that's good in terms of your spiritual development and growth is dependent on one thing. It's dependent on one thing. That one thing is process. Process. For example, growth is always the result of exposure to the right process. And when I say process is defined as subject to treatment with the aim of readying for some purpose, improving or remedying a condition. And so often the focus is on results. The focus is on reaching some goal or some milestone. But really our focus should always be on process. What is going on in terms of process? See, let me explain something to you. We are finite beings, okay? And because we're finite beings, we do not have the power to dictate things. We do not have the power to initiate change. And as much as man tries to act like he all that and he don't need God, he basically is reacting. We are reactive beings. We are reactive. See, God is sovereign. And that means he is the one who is determining things and making things happen. We, on the other hand, must make the most of whatever cards he deals. I mean, our success or failure depends on how, unlike God, we don't have the power to change things or make things happen. We're really at the mercy of whatever way he is dealing with us and whatever he's doing in our lives. And that's why we all need God. That's why a fool said in his heart, there is no God. I mean, it's really crazy that you're gonna sit up here when you can't even control how long you live. You don't control. Every once in a while, there'll come a storm through and I'll just wreck the whole, and throw everybody in flux. It's almost like God's giving us a reminder. Y'all ain't running nothing. Y'all. And it's such a blessing that you realize that. I mean, you're in such a better position to make the most out of life when you realize who is really running things, who's really in charge. I really feel sorry for people that don't know Jesus. I feel sorry for them because, they are completely in a false reality. When you do not believe in God, you are ignoring the most glaring aspect of life, and that is that we are all the subject of what He does. And so our need for God comes from the fact that He alone determines our fate and sets conditions that we live in. And the Bible is about showing us how to access God and to teach us how to depend on Him, and showing us specifically the ways in which we can conform to His will, to His requirements. Because, as I said, we're at the mercy of whatever He does and whatever He says. And when you look at what He's doing, that is the key to what you should be doing. Because, as I said, we are reacting to Him. We're subservient to Him. He is showing us the way. He is leading us in the way we should go. And so the experience that we have and the experience that He puts us through is what changes us and causes us to be the way we are. I mean, He orders our steps. And what does the Bible say? He leads us. What's Psalm 23? He said He leads us in the paths of righteousness. Not for our own benefit, for His righteousness' sake. And so today I want to talk about, actually, I don't really have I usually start with a scripture. No, I just want to start with a word: process. I mean, you need to pay attention to process. You see what God is doing by looking at the process. I mean, by that I mean, give attention to procedure, operation. Let's focus on that. Focus on, well, your approach, your execution, with attention to detail and how you're doing things, what you're doing with things. Because I really believe that the Bible is critical in our lives, because basically what the Bible does is it teaches us principles for how God works and how He moves. And it helps us to be equipped for life. And that's why the Bible was written so long ago, but it's still relevant. I mean, you think about the contrast between what life was back in ancient times and what it is today. And yet here you have a book that's still current. It's still applicable. I mean, if that's not a miracle, if that's not a sign that this is of divine origin, what human being is smart enough to write something today that 2,000 years from now, people will read and find relevant? How is the book, the Bible, still, after all these years, the #1 bestseller? It's been around all this time, but it always is the best-selling piece of literature in the world. I digress. And so it's so important because I gotta find my sheets. Okay, that's why the Bible was written so long. Okay, and nowadays, the one thing that has not changed about the way we live in the ancient world, the one thing has not changed is that God is in control. I mean, that has not changed. Actually, we have the same situation or condition as people had in, 1000 BC. And that is, we're interacting with the world that's under the control of a sovereign God. And when you realize that life is all about interpreting things through a spiritual context, I believe when you look at things, for example, through a spiritual lens, in terms of how God is in the center of life, that's when you're best equipped for your life to be meaningful, satisfying, and what I'd say enjoyable. I mean, that really sets the tone for the quality of life that you can have. I mean, and Jesus said that. He said, I've come that you may have life and that you may have it more abundantly. That was in the plan of God. His plan was to reveal himself, not just so he could show us who he is, but he revealed himself so that he could be the way, the truth, and the life. And so, God just makes all the difference, because no matter who you are, you can't be anything other than what he created you to be. And that is to be for his purposes and for his glory. And like Jesus told Paul, well, he was Saul at the time, he said, Saul, it's hard to kick against the pricks. I mean, really, what are you doing? I mean, you could resist and you could say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and that. But the bottom line is, you don't have the ability to resist what God is executing and determining you are going to be. And your failure to allow him to be your Lord and to shape you and guide you and direct you is to your own detriment. It's to your own demise. I mean, and in the final analysis, you're going to come up short. I mean, you're just going to miss out on the whole. He's just too powerful. He's too, well, you were made for this, okay? And you can't be anything other than what he has willed for you to be. So just stop it, okay? And so, I'm sorry. I tell you, I'm feeling kind of good today. But look, I want to talk to you about Exodus. I don't know how I get off on these little tangents, but I want you to know that this period in Old Testament history is called Exodus. Now, Exodus means, the word Exodus means departing. It means to leave. And it has to do with you, excuse me, I lost my notes. Get out for my notes. It means for you to be in transition from, so it involves leaving a place, going from one place to the other place. That's number one, okay? And then it also means having a change in your processing of where you are, okay? I had this written down, but I can't find my notes. I'm gonna have to, what did I do with my notes? Oh, here they go. Oh, sorry about that. That's a rookie mistake. But life, it shows us that life is a journey. That we begin at a certain point and we end at a particular destination. And in this case, the Exodus is from bondage to freedom. It's leaving the place of bondage and it's going to the place of freedom. You got to see your life that way. The evolving from what you were into what God intends for you to be. And so you could say it's about a transition from one state of being to a different or better state of being. You know, there's a verse in Psalm 66. I want to read this to you. It talks about process. 66th chapter and the 10th and the 11th, 10th through the 12th verse. And I just thought this was such a nugget this morning because God showed it to me this morning. I don't even ever remember reading it before, but it kind of capsulizes what I'm saying about process. It says in 66 and verse 10, it says, "For thou, O God, hast proved us." Proved means tested us, means put us through some kind of rigors where he was seeking to make us aware of things within ourselves. Self-awareness, consciousness of what it is. He's getting our attention. He's helping us to realize, wait a minute, what are you doing? He has proved us. He's put us through certain kinds of things in order to bring about a change. He says, "Thou hast tried us as silver is tried." I'm sitting there reading this. I need to look up. This might be a good thing. Like, what's the difference between being proved and tried? Are those two different words? I probably believe that they are. Maybe one is a progressive stage of the other. But whatever the case, I wish I had thought to look that up. But he says, "You've proved us and you've tried us." And then he says, as silver is tried. In other words, he's comparing what he does in our life to the smelting process. And those of you that know something about that understand that metals that you see don't come out of the ground looking like metals. Okay, silver, when you get it out of the ground, it doesn't look like silver. It looks like a bunch of rocks and dirt, and it looks worthless, all right? But what you do is you put it through a very hot process. Oh, wait a minute, I used that word again. You put it into a very hot process. And you know what happens when it gets in that process? The intense heat melts away the part of the silver that is dirt or foreign matter or things that are not silver. The pure silver attaches itself together and the other part is burnt away, because the difference between silver and all the other materials that are in it is that silver will not burn. It will not, disintegrate. You can't destroy it with heat. What heat does is it purifies it. It makes the silver come together. It makes the silver become pure. I love that he says that's what the process is about. It's about making us pure like silver. And then he says this, "Thou broughtest us into the net." Look at that, the net. In other words, he is imposing his will on us. God is forcing us into the net. "Thou layest affliction upon our loins." I mean, you're making us have to deal with things. And those things are not all pleasant and they don't always feel good. he uses the word affliction. He uses a word that has to do with pressure or discomfort. He says, thou hast caused men to ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water. But look at this. But thou broughtest us out into a wealthy place. Wow, I'm going to tell you. Look, you ought to write that verse down and read that over a few times, okay? Especially when you're experiencing that affliction. Because the number one thing I need you to understand about process is not confusing, it's not haphazard, it's not random. Process is God's way that he is bringing to pass his will in your life. And so when we talk about Exodus, we're talking about process. And that process, as I said, has to do with a departure from something and a coming into or arriving at a place. Not just a place, but as I said, a state of being, a way of thinking. It's about equipping us and preparing us for what God has for us. That God wants to relate to us at an intimate level. He wants us to experience him at a sense where he becomes our all. And so he has a process that he's taken us through with the intent. And so often we are enduring the process, but we don't understand the goal, the aim, what's going to be the outcome. And that's what causes us to get discouraged. That's why we're confused about God. And sometimes we doubt him. Sometimes we assume the worst about him because we don't realize that this is a process that is going to be working out for our good. That's what we got to keep in mind. And like I said, well, this is my favorite stage in the Bible because it's all about deliverance. That might be my favorite word. Because I personally believe that ministry is all about deliverance. Okay? When I say that, I just believe that deliverance covers every aspect of what God is doing. He's delivering us from all the corresponding bondage that was associated as a result of the fall of Adam, but then also our own life before we knew Christ. And even it's generational in the sense that there are things that have been handed down through the generations that we really literally need to be delivered from. Because God's aim is to bring us to a place of liberation, place of freedom. Getting us out of a place and then preparing us for a new place. You think about it. Exodus is about leaving Egypt and then coming into the promised land. And it's like there are three kind of freedoms: the freedom from bondage, the freedom from the effects of the bondage, and learning how to live freely. I know I'm dropping a lot on you. You're going to have to go back and listen. You're going to have to go back and listen to this a couple times, all right? Because I'm dropping a lot on you. Because this is really stuff you need to think about. I mean, don't take the word in where you just it's like trying to put too much in your mouth and trying to chew it and swallow it. No, you got to chew softly. Now, I'm dropping it on you, okay? Because God just drops it on me. But I need you I need you to just, it's sort of like the cows, you know. Y'all ain't from the country. I ain't from the country either. But my granddad from the country, man, he used to tell me, my granddad was a brilliant man. I mean, at the time I didn't realize it, but I mean, he'd say things. And one thing he said about how he said to me one time, he said, you know, he said, if you ever notice how did the cows will, you know, they'll be, in the morning, cows be out there just gorging on the grass, and they'll be eating like crazy when it's cool in the morning. That's when they be like, and they just be like eating like crazy. But when that sun come out, because it get hot in Texas, when that sun would come out, them cows wouldn't be eating nothing. Them cows be over there in the shade. Cows like, man, it's too hot to be out there, okay? But they would still be eating because everything that they had consumed, like now they would bring it back up. Well, that's kind of disgusting. But I'm just saying, we bring it back up, and they would be sitting over in the shade, and they would be, In other words, it's like they would take it in, and then they would take the time to chew it before it was digested. And so that's what it is. And so, I'm sorry, I digress. So the process that God puts us in forces us to learn things that we need to know about God, that equips us to have a quality relationship with Him. That's what I'm trying to say, okay? And so you got to appreciate the process. Stop resisting the process. Stop getting frustrated with the process. Stop getting mad because you want to be here, you want to do that, and you don't feel like you're getting where you need to be. You know, one of the basketball players with the Philadelphia 76ers, Joel Embiid, in his first 2 years, he was a top pick. You know, he kept getting hurt. He kept having injuries. And so the Philadelphia fans, who are probably the most impatient fans you'll ever find in the world, they was like really being critical of him and talking really bad about him and everything. And you know what he told them? He said, y'all got to trust the process. And sure enough, man, now, of course he got hurt the other day, but now that dude, he is so dominant. And now that he did come back from injury, I'm going to tell you, that team right there with him, can't nobody stop him. He's the most dominant player in the league because he told them fans, he said, look, y'all got to trust the process. And so there's certain processes that enable you to change how you think and what you think so that you can be equipped to live by faith. As I was studying this, God said to me, that was what the faith mindset teaching was all about. It wasn't just about getting people from one place to the next place. It's more about changing their mindset, changing how they think, because that in itself is a critical piece to stuff starting to make sense. I mean, and really being able to believe in God, to relax and to not resist Him or even get upset at what He's doing or how long something's taking, but to learn how to make the most of whatever process. Because as it says in this verse 6:6, he said that His aim is to bring you into a wealthy place. Matter of fact, that'd be another word to look up. Are we willing to bet? I haven't done it yet. I'd be willing to bet the word wealthy means more than just the attaining of possessions. You ought to look up that word. Look that word up in your Strong Concordance. What does wealthy place mean? Especially my ministers, see, because I done told you, you got to look up word meanings. You got to know what words mean because English is very limited. Hebrew has multiple meanings for one word. Greek, multiple meanings. English is kind of, it's kind of a low-level language. And sometimes it's even confusing. I mean, people who from other countries say English is the hardest thing to learn because it don't have set rules. It doesn't have, patterns. I mean, like I said, people in England were not the highest civilization and culture, okay, contrary. Africa was much better, more advanced. But anyway, my point is, what is my point? I digress. Is that process allows for areas about you and in you to change in order so that you can live freely. Do you understand? And like I said, there's so many scriptures that reinforce this, that make this something that you got to be aware of. I mean, stop worrying about what you're doing and ask yourself, what is God doing? What is God doing in my life? I mean, instead of like just seeing things like that are happening around you like they are attacks of the devil, could we stop worrying about the devil? Let me say something about the devil. The devil is so below God that God can actually use him for your benefit. He think he hurting you. He think he frustrating you. He think you messing you up. And no, God is so much way ahead of the devil that he allows the devil to fulfill what he is doing in you for your good. And so, I mean, he ain't even somebody you got to be concerned about. Anything, let me put it this way, anything that happens to you, right, it cleared God's desk. Do you hear me? Anything, everything. And when you realize it cleared his desk, it got God's approval, God allowed it, you realize, why am I fearing something that a loving God has allowed to happen? Do you understand me? All about process. It's like, there's so many scriptures. Hey, look, let me read this one to you. Deuteronomy 8 chapter and 3rd verse. Process. Think of process. Man, I ain't got my watch. Deuteronomy 8 chapter 3rd verse. Matter of fact, my first book that I wrote, which is out of print and I need to reprint it or something. It says, he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger and fed thee with manna, which thou knewest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man doth not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God. Think about that. Process. He intentionally had you to eat manna so that he could help you to understand how to rely and to depend completely on him as your life, as your source. I mean, think about that. How many times in your life did God let something fail or let something come up short with the distinct purpose of getting you to realize, instead of depending on that, I need to rely fully on God? How many times has God, taken something from you that you had a strong attachment to, and you felt so disappointed? You were so hurt because you wanted that, because you had become so accustomed to it. But then in retrospect, because he took it away, he could give you something so much better, something so much more needed and necessary for you. I mean, and so there's so many scriptures about process. And I'm tempted to go through that, but I'll use up all my time. But you get my point. I need you to look around and look up and understand and think about it. I need you to ask yourself, ask God this. Say, God, what are you doing? The next time you have a setback, next time you have something that disappoints you, something that seems counterproductive, or the next person that you deal with that leaves you in a state where you just, ask yourself, okay, wait a minute here. Hold on. Morning Manna was talking about, okay, God, what you doing? But what are you teaching me in this? What are you revealing in this? What are you showing me? He may tell you. He may tell you. He might not. He might not. But just take my word for it. This is God's dealing. I think we like to think of God's dealing when he's blessing us. Blessing us is just one aspect. And actually, if all he did was bless us, we probably wouldn't get much better. We wouldn't grow. We wouldn't become what God wants us to be, right? And when I say blessing you got to realize blessing is not always something you're doing for you positive. Sometimes blessing you is exposing you. I mean, you think about school, right? I mean, some of the things you had to learn were complicated, they were hard, they were difficult. I mean, you had a hard time getting through it, but it was a blessing because you learned some things that right now you're making a living off of. I mean, if you hadn't learned that, you wouldn't be able to get that check. That check come on Friday. I mean, but at the time, that teacher, that work, that staying up at night, man, that's a process. But think about it. That process set you up. And so it's just so absolutely important. What does he say? The trying of your faith worketh patience. That's what James says. And I love that verse where David is talking in the Psalms. He said, I had fainted. I had fainted if I hadn't believed in the process. He said, I had fainted if I had not believed to see the goodness of God in the land of the living. And when you think about it, let me just chase this rabbit for a minute. Now, you know, sometimes when I'm chasing a rabbit, that's just God is like shifting me up and telling me something that I didn't study for. So it ain't always. So y'all that be saying, Pastor D, chase too many rabbits. I want you to know it's by divine origin, all right? But if you think about it, in the Bible and also with the teachings of Jesus, so often he described the nature of what we call spirituality or growth or interaction with God from a context of a process. You take, for example, germination. Germination. He said a sower went out, the parable of sowing seed. He talking about the germination process. Some fall on stone. Some fell on, rocks. Some fell, didn't get any depth. And I'm trying to think of some of the other things, the reason why the seed. See, because a seed, I don't know if anything that's more miraculous than a seed. I mean, I really believe God made things with a seed just to show us how that he is God. Because when you look at a seed, a small little seed, there's no way in your mind that you would think that could become this giant tree that's producing fruit. How crazy is that? This little seed could become that. And yet that's the germination process. That's why Jesus, if you have faith of a mustard seed, you can say to the mountain, be like, what was he talking about? He's talking about the fact that germination, a seed can be a little small thing, but through the process, it can become something vastly immense and great. You see what I'm saying? I mean, and the hydraulic cycle, I don't know if you remember learning this in school, you know, but how that water takes different forms. It can be fog, it can be rain, it can be mist, it can be in clouds. The hydraulic cycle, so shall my word that goes forth out of my mouth, it shall not return unto me void, but it will prosper in the thing which I please. That's the hydraulic cycle. How that when it rains, the rain goes down, and then in a couple hours, it don't look like it's dry again. It don't look like nothing even happened. But that rain has gone down to the earth and starting to cause things to happen under the ground and causing plants and vegetation. And then at some point, that rain that fell, amen, changes to water vapor, and then it rises up, back up into and forms into clouds. Then it reaches dew point, and then it comes back down again. A process. Are y'all following me today? Oh, man, I'm chasing this rabbit. I'm gonna chase this rabbit. I mean, you take sanctification. He said, you know, John the Baptist said this. Man, I'm gonna tell you, I wish when I get to heaven, I'm not trying to go now, Lord, I'm just saying. But but you know, when I get to heaven, I want to see John the Baptist preach. I mean, I want to play the tape. I just want to sit there and listen to him preach, because I mean, all we have is little snippets. But I tell you, I bet he was laying some wood, because I love great preaching anyway. But John the Baptist said, he said, he that come after you, whose shoes I'm not even worthy to unleash, he shall baptize you with the Holy Ghost with fire. And then he said, whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge the floor. Man, that's process. And gather the wheat into the garner. That's the sanctification process. I mean, you know. And then what about farming, where you say, whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. You can't get apple trees if you sowing, you know, some other kind of seed. I mean, ain't nobody cultivating no weeds. Do you know any weed factories? I mean, so if you got weeds, don't get mad. Ask yourself, what seeds am I planting? Because, of course, you don't have to find those seeds for weeds. They just come out of nowhere. But I'm just saying that that Jesus said, by their fruits you shall know them. By the results. And that's through the kind of process that they go through. And they're talking about cleansing and cleaning. You know, where he says in Ephesians, he said that he might present to himself a glorious church without spot or wrinkle. And then Peter mentions the smelting process also in 1 Peter 1:7, where he says, you know, after you suffered a while, he will settle you and he will shape you. I mean, process is really what's going on. Let me show you one. My favorite. Well, I have a lot of favorites, but this is one of my favorite, okay? Where he says, when you pass through the waters, they will not overtake you. And when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. Neither shall the flame kindle upon you. That's process. I mean, you're like thinking, what am I doing in this water? I could drown. No, God is going to keep you and prevent the waters from getting too high. And then when you go through the fire, man, is anything more frightening than fire? But the point of it is he's taking you through the fire, not so you'll burn up, but so that the heat can change. When you put something in the oven, You don't put it in the oven to destroy it. You put it in the oven so it will change. Because the raw meat changes into something that is succulent and tastes really good, as if you know how to cook. But I'm just saying. But then a lot of people ignore the last part where he say, neither shall the flame kindle on you. In other words, there's some things you go through and the intent is for God to cause you to be inflammable. In other words, when you go through, you discover and change into a form where you can't burn. Hey man, the enemy try to put fire on you, but the fire just goes out. You're beyond the fire. And you had to go through, and you have something that's inflammable. It's gone through a treatment process where it has taken on a form that will not burn. You know what I mean? All about process. So I'm running out of time. Let's see what time is it? I don't have my watch on.
6:54.
Oh shoot, it's time. Thank you, baby. I tell you, when you talk about a helpmate, Pastor S is a helpmate. Boy, I tell you, wouldn't have made it without it. But anyway, my time gone. Let me ask you a question. What about what's going on in my life has more to do with God giving me something to make me better, to improve my approach, and most of all, bring me closer to God. I mean, I went to see one of my members, and I'm gonna tell you something, I have the best members in the world. They have faith. And one of the greatest, comforting things is when I go see y'all in the hospital and you are under the gun. I mean, you're up against it, right? Maybe even your life is on the line. Doctors don't know what to do. It always blesses me that when I talk to you, you have faith. I was talking to one of my members a couple years ago, and she had cancer, and it was really at an advanced stage. And I went in there, I was just trying to encourage her, talk to her and stuff. And man, she blew me out the water. I've been shaking my head ever since. She looked up at me and she said, Pastor D, they say I got cancer. They said I probably won't die from this cancer. I mean, and I understand all that. She said, but you know something? This ain't nothing but similar to all the ways in which God has worked in my life. And this ain't nothing but a process. And I ain't even pressed about dying, because maybe that's the result of this process. But what I'm looking at is how this is making me closer to Jesus. Oh, man, let me tell you something. Man, when I left her room, I sat in my car for about 20 minutes. I just was just thinking about what she said, because I realized that lady had dropped something on me. She had made me realize, because I'm like worried about this, I'm upset about this, somebody said this, somebody doing this, And it's like she helped me to realize, stop worrying about what's happening and ask yourself, how can this make me closer to Jesus? Woo! Glory to God, my time gone. I'm gonna have to let y'all go. I ain't finished with you. But what right now is going on, that's not about what you're making it. It's all about process. And you know what? I'm gonna do this next week because I ain't finished. Exodus, leaving bondage and going to the place of freedom. Manna out. Manna out.
Manna out.
Out manna.
Manna.
The manna is out.
Manna out. Manna out.
Wow. That was...
Oh, Jesus. Man, I tell you. Process, honey.
I gotta get that one again. That was a lie.
It's it's funny how God just took over that thing, that thing over from me. He was like, okay, I know you got your little notes, whatever. He's like, look, let me tell you something. I'm taking over today.
That was powerful. That's just where I've been. Lord